Hello and welcome to this episode of the Oscar Isaac Acting Appreciation Society. No, wait, sorry. This is the meeting of the Talking Hippos Appreciation Society. No, wait. This is actually Superhero Ethics, which is not just the Moon Knight show, but honestly, Moon Knight is giving us so much to talk about every episode that we got a lot to talk about. And so here we are back to talk about Moon Knight Episode 5 right here on Superhero Ethics with myself, Paul Hoppy, and Will Freeland right after this commercial break that we have absolutely 100% zero control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew, your host. If you're watching us on video, you'd see two bouncing gremlins in my video screens named Paul Hoppy and Will Freeland. Let's start with Mr. Will Freeland. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm okay. Today I'm a little burnt out on work. It's just one of those days, I guess, kind of one of those weeks. I hear I'm not the only one. Other people that I've been talking to have been kind of burnt out as well. So maybe it's not just me. But
That's fair.
But watching Moon Knight at midnight was a huge highlight to my week.
Yeah, I could see how in the text messages you sent, I could see how much you were like biting back the spoiler comments you wanted to make, and I just got this random message like, "Wow." From you. So we'll have a lot to discuss.
Well, there's this rule in like the Stranded Panda Facebook group of just like even putting like your full like reaction to stuff is semi-spoiler, and so like I can't do a spoiler like nesting within a Facebook message, so I could only just say wow.
Yeah, that's fair.
I will say, however strict the Stranded Panda rules about spoilers are, and they are fairly strict, Mr. Paul Hoppy's rules are quite stricter.
Yep. Can't
so
tell me who
really
the director is.
That's the authority to check with. But yeah, Paul, what about you? How's today treating you?
Yeah, I'm voting for burned out on work, but like still on fire too. I don't know. I tried to watch 25 hours of coaching material in the last 24 hours, which is what happens when you put something on 2x speed and spend half your time doing a thing. Came up a little short, but it was still very invigorating and exhausting. So yeah, if I'm a little squirrely today, that's why. I did watch Moon Knight at midnight and then went to sleep and woke up and watched another 10 hours of poker videos. So yeah.
I have spent a good deal of the last 72 hours trying to tell people that when someone says, "Please call me by these pronouns," refusing to do so is actually not a very nice thing to do.
Oh, it's such a dick move.
Right? Yet it was a matter of recent contention within my work community, so it's been a busy couple of days, but rewarding, and stuff. It made me like remember why I love my job, but also just a lot of humanity.
So
humanity.
Yeah, I'm glad we have this kind of lighthearted, escapist show that just is about like Egyptian gods and fun moon things and cool combat. Oh wait, no, that's not what the show is. I think this was the most emotionally harrowing episode that I have seen on Disney Marvel.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily sure it's the best, although it's absolutely probably in the top 5. It might well be the best, but it was just like, what'd you all think of the episode?
My jaw dropped multiple times. I'm leaning forward the entire episode, just like as in trying to fill up my entire field of vision of just the screen, so I have zero possible distractions. It was so amazing. I said last week that I didn't think we'd get an entire episode in the asylum because I didn't think there'd be much to do there, and I was thoroughly wrong, and I am so happy with what they did with it. That was wild. That was absolutely wild.
Although, were they in the asylum the whole time?
Well, okay,
or were they never in the asylum?
Right.
That's the question.
It was an entire episode dealing with deep journeys into the brain and the mind,
right,
for sure,
and the disordered working of such.
Yes. I didn't think they could move the story forward in the realm of whatever we were dealing with at the time. But and big picture, I guess they didn't necessarily move the story forward that far.
They moved it
but
backwards.
they did a lot of backfill, a lot
Yeah.
of origin, and that was totally fine.
Yeah.
I feel
Paul,
like
what do you
in
think
a
of it?
lot of ways, this episode was a mirror of the WandaVision penultimate episode, where Agatha kind of took her on a journey through her past, right? Through her
Yeah.
To
past
figure out
memories,
why she
is who she is. And this, I feel like this episode did basically the same thing. I think I liked this episode better. There were still, it felt a little shark jumpy in some ways to me. Like, but on the other hand, it's also kind of just like committing to the bit, like basically being like, look, we're going to ride a boat through the underworld at magic hour and, you know, talk about dying and how that works in the MCU, which, like, okay, you know, but like the actual interactions between the people I really enjoyed a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did enjoy that setting being a substantial, like the whole episode was framed within the setting, but they delved out of it by going through different doors. Is that similar to how that setting's used in the comics, or is it like pretty different?
In the comics, as far as when they're referencing this, when they're pulling from the where the storyline that he's in like a mental hospital and that kind of stuff, there is a handful of similarities of using doors to jump scenes and such. As soon as he gets outside in the comics, the first time he goes outside, he sees a giant sprawling Egyptian cityscape, and it's very strange, and it's a total, everything is white inside, and then when you get outside it's all blacks and reds, and it's very jarring. And so when they did that in the episode, I was like, oh, that's really fun, and so like that was fine. But the having each door being like a different memory to explore Marc Spector's past, that is different because his past has already been explored in other like comics and stuff. And so this was in the comics, it's much more focused on what story they want to tell here. I see. Instead of like establishing a get to know me.
Right. Here it was like a manner of revealing all the backstory that we've been speculating on to this point.
Yeah. And for me, I kind of have two feelings on the whole talking hippo-ness of it and what you're saying about the jumping the shark. I think it definitely had the potential for that. I think for me, I just found the talking hippo kind of adorable, but more importantly, I don't think it would have worked in an episode where the rest of it wasn't this incredibly dark. And not even dark, but just dealing with like very real, very emotionally traumatic topics.
Right. Grounded, if you will.
Yeah, and I think you kind of needed some of the like the ridiculous silliness just to kind of have a moment of like, God, not everything in the world is awful and terrible.
Right.
The other thing though is if I thought this was saying, here is what is actually happening, the Egyptians were right about the underworld, I think I would feel the way you do. Or at least if I understand what you're saying, and maybe I misunderstood. I think that, to me, I think the line that I think I most understood in this episode was when they kind of said, look, on some level, Mark, you are currently dying in this tomb where you've been shot, and everything that's happening right now is what's going on in your head.
Right.
And so maybe that he is on some level, his spirit, his, whatever is going to the Egyptian underworld. Maybe that is entirely his subconscious because that's how he has learned to think about those things, plus with the push that Khonshu was giving him. Like, I felt like there was enough of a mystery around it that it wasn't entirely clear. And we'll see where that goes next episode. Because, I think especially after what they did with the Norse gods, it would feel a little weird if they were like, okay, most gods are actually like aliens or other things, but no, the Egyptian gods are real. Like, that's actually a religious statement the show is making.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what I can say about it. The idea that is or isn't religious, but that the Norse like are, I don't know. It's messy. I feel like there is room for it to be like, what are you doing? But like on the other hand, it's like, I don't know, why not? Like, sure, like there, I mean, what does it even mean to be a god on some level? Like, they just are some sort of beings, right? Like, and they're doing what they do. And like, this is, what does it mean to die in the MCU? I don't know. Have we had ghosts or something? Or basically people just come back to life because they never really died, or somehow they're from another timeline, or they go to Tahiti.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had a character who has experienced like actual physical brain death, dead, and then come back to life in a way that wasn't scientific, or like we have never had anything about like an afterlife or spiritualness or ghosts or. I think
Well, I mean,
isn't not Rough Rider. God, that's wrong.
Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider, I think has literally but that's all like spirits trapped in the Necronomicon. So.
And that's also Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as opposed to...
Are we considering Agents fully canon, or is it still like canon adjacent, like semi-canon?
There are definitely parts of it that don't fit canon. So yeah, I think it's considered canon. It is in the same place that the Netflix MCU is,
right?
In theory,
which is that is probably just another verse, and then they will cross over to the point that is convenient, and it still probably won't make tons of sense, but like people go, oh, it's got so and so, Coulson's back,
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
exactly.
Man, the first 2 seasons of Agents were so as connected as they could be, considering like timelines and writing schedules and stuff. But
stay on target.
So good.
Stay on target.
Yep. Sorry.
So much to talk about, to be sure. Okay, so let's first, why don't you kind of maybe break it down by the different kind of like worlds they were in. So first, in terms of the, Egyptian boat of the dead, and we can talk about whether it was like, sailing over or jumping over the shark or whatever. But beyond that, kind of, I thought it was an interesting conceit of, first of all, for both of them, but this idea of like their lives being judged, because I think, at least for Mark, it seems part of what we're learning is that that's his entire thing right now, is he has had his worthiness to live questioned since he was a very young kid by the horrible situation that happened with his brother and his mother. So there I was like, let's focus just on what happens on the boat, but then immediately went to what we saw happen in the past. But yeah, just like from the situation on the boat with the scales and stuff like that, what'd you take away from that scene? Those scenes?
I guess there's a cynical takeaway on the resolution of the scales, of like, if you have someone who has DID, they can't be fully judged until there's only like one personality or one like identity in control or in existence. When like, because the scales didn't necessarily come to balance until Steven was removed from the equation and fell into the sand. And that seems, I mean, there's a clickbait article title somewhere in that situation, in that scene. Yeah. But I liked the like off balance perspective, because Steven and Mark are so different that the two, for lack of a better phrase, the two souls are in contention with each other. But I also felt like that should have been what brings the balance to their like weighing, I guess. I don't know.
Like they balance one another out, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly one thing I was struck by, and yeah, I think at this point trying to stick to one particular venue at a time, it's a dumb idea. We can talk about like different aspects of the episode. I was very struck by how much these two personalities now care about, not only just like need each other, but care about each other, and how much like, we saw kind of at the end of last episode, we saw during last episode just the utter joy they had of being able to experience each other, not just looking in a mirror, but also just the utter panic that both of them have when either one's in danger, and the extent to which, well, there's some self-serving in Mark protecting Steven, we'll get into that whole situation, but also just the degree to which both of them are so scared when the other one's in danger, and then how Mark reacts when Steven goes off the edge. To me, that's so different from where the two personalities were just a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, I thought that was really great development. I think if it is like a literal, there's these gods and they're like weighing the hearts of humans or whatever, like whatever, they're a bunch of a-holes and like I don't know. But like if like this is a metaphor for if this is like what's going on in his mind, because
Right.
there is this conflict between, these two personalities, but that they are coming to appreciate one another and sort of see themselves as both being important, not like seeing what's important in themselves, but also what's important in the other personality. I think that's a very, I just realized something. I think that's a very cool idea and a very like kind of a touching one, and beyond like the however it relates to DID, I think you can also kind of extrapolate into just any person the idea that like we're complex beings, right? Like we're not always just one thing or another, and kind of coming to terms with like all of the parts of ourselves and accepting all of us as who we are, I think is powerful.
Yeah, no, I think it's very true. And one thing I think I want to be very clear that none of the three of us are psychotherapy experts, and so we're going to talk about that scene as lay people. I have a guest who's going to be coming on. I was hoping she'd come on today. Unfortunately, she got COVID. It is still a concern, people. Please wear your masks in places where you should be wearing your masks, even if people tell you shouldn't be. But for the love of God, get vaccinated and boosted, please, if you haven't already. But so I was hoping she'd be on for this episode. I didn't realize how important it would be, but clearly we want her on. She's got COVID. She'll be on probably either for next episode or as kind of a season wrap up. We'll go into much more detail about the actual understanding of DID. I've done a little bit of research on this, and so I have a little bit of understanding but we're mostly going to talk about this, like what we experience in the show as lay people. But certainly from the little bit I understand, this goes to what you were saying, Paul, DID it's not like a situation that like it is a person who has dissociative identity disorder. Like lots of people disassociate. Right. It isn't quite to that level. And there probably is some kind of like clear break line between when it clearly becomes DID. But I think that certainly the idea that people have like distinctly different parts of their personality, and it could be the person who like goes into kind of like a childlike state because maybe because just they choose to, because they find that healthy or cathartic, or because that's their reaction to trauma, or because and it's not a full disassociation, but it's kind of like a different state of mind. Or you can go into people who just get very like, okay, I cannot feel my emotions right now. I have to disassociate from my emotions. I just have to fix the problem, and then I can feel emotions 36 hours from now.
Right.
So yeah, I think you're right. That's something it's obviously about a very specific situation, but it's one that a lot of other people I think can relate to as well. So let's talk about that. I mean, I think the main thing that happened in this episode is we finally got the backstory of, well, how Mark and Khonshu got together, but where Steven comes from, and that one thing we were talking about was like, is Steven or the dissociative identity disorder in part a result of Khonshu? And I think what we should, first of all, the first question kind of get into is, so how do you feel that now that we've seen that whatever Mark is going through started 30 years before he ever met Khonshu?
I think it makes sense in terms of as a story, and Khonshu kind of taking advantage of Mark, like, taking advantage of him, yeah, but like he was also dying, so I don't know.
Right.
Like, he had a lot of leverage, and he used the leverage, right? It seems like he wasn't targeting him because of, the whole Mark and Steven bit. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a powerful story, what happened as a child. I do think if there is a third personality, I think maybe that has something to do with the backstory, whatever happened in the cave. But kind of like also hopefully not, because I feel like on some level that would kind of vindicate his mom.
Oh, that was Mark doing something intent. Yeah,
right, but like that wasn't Mark. But it does that. I feel like that I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, and I don't think that would fit the idea, because dissociative identity disorder is generally a response to childhood trauma. And the trauma begins after the death of
right.
with
It
the
begins
death of the
at
brother.
the death of, right? I mean, or
Right.
the events leading up to it, the tragedy.
So I would say to me that is I would definitely not like that. It would not fit the definition of DID. It's exactly the kind of thing that I'm sure someone in the writer's room suggested exactly that idea.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping they got talked out of it, but we'll kind of see.
Yeah.
Will, what about you? How'd you feel about the getting to see that story?
I really liked it. So from a I read too many comics perspective, I saw it as they closed off this storyline kind of a thing because his brother is involved in like a couple of storylines in the comics, but so like it's a great story, and I think they did an amazing job with it, and I can't even imagine. I mean, I appreciate that they let our imagination come up with what happened in the cave. I don't think we need to see it.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine whatever the situation was in there. I mean, his brother is not as slim or as fit as Mark was at that age, and so like I kind of feel like clearly there was a physical ability or physical inability to survive in the cave when the water was coming down. And
Well, his brother's
I don't
just
need to
younger,
see
I think,
that.
right?
Yeah, he's
His
younger
brother
too,
was younger, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to see that. That was really tough those handful of scenes were so tough to watch.
I think it's funny. I didn't even thought of that, but I feel like if we had seen that, it would open the door for us to sort of frame by frame analyze what Mark does and ask, should we hold him responsible in some way? And like, I think by not showing it, you're kind of like, he's an 8-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you asked, if you're actually worried about the safety of your child, you don't depend upon your 8-year-old to keep your 6-year-old safe. Like, and also like, even if he was, like, I think the clear indication is that the mother doesn't think Stephen did enough and that Stephen doesn't think he did enough. But I also think in a situation like that, Stephen might have done everything he possibly could have, and it might not have helped, you know, because it's a Mark. So I think you're right that it would have been hard to watch that, but I also think it's in some ways it's better that we didn't, because it lets us really focus on.
Yeah.
It's funny because like I think what the mother I think blaming a child for that is monstrous.
Yeah.
I also definitely understand, not in any way justify or escape or like kind of condone, but I also understand like how much the mother is acting out of her own pain and trauma, and then doing the thing people way too often do with pain and trauma is they find someone else to blame and take it out on them.
I mean,
Can we also take a quick second to highlight how hard that the father is trying? We don't usually see a whole lot of overly loving and caring father figures in stories, and he, you know, like that's still the woman he loved and had 2 children with, and that's also his child that he's trying to like be there for and help be happy to some degree. That was
he's there trying to hold the family together, and it's just not possible, or it's just not working. And
Right.
I think with the mom, I mean, it's, you know, understandable and horrible, as a lot of horrible things are on some level. Also, I think maybe her blaming Mark is a way of avoiding blaming herself, right? Like she's projecting, right?
That whole like you don't trust your 6-year-old with your 8-year-old. I'm making up.
You don't trust your little kid with your slightly less little kid in a cave in Chicago. Like, I don't understand why there's like a cave in the backyard or whatever. But okay, like, but sure. But like, yeah, you know, that's I personally I feel like often there's too much parental supervision of kids, but like when things are literally physically dangerous on a level like that, like there's probably a certain amount of caution that is required. Like crossing the street in New York, like it's.
And there's also an extent to which, I mean, I think like, and granted, I have some background on this because I used to do counseling for people who'd gone through like child loss and reproductive loss, and like, I do think that the most careful of parents might still sometimes have a horrible tragedy happen.
Of course.
Tragedies happen. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't know there was going to be any water in this
kid.
It was part of it. So here's a question I have for you. And I, on the one hand, because I think part of the thing is also like, there's her reaction to everything, and then there's when she starts actually literally beating Stephen. We happily, again, don't really see it. Mark, sorry. But we see the belt and we very clearly know what happens. We hear the beginning of it. On the one hand, I mean, childhood abuse of kids happens all the time, unfortunately. And it does happen kind of to what you're saying, Will. I think the assumption is often that it's the male parent who's doing it when there is a male and a female parent, but sometimes it is the female parent. It probably is more often the male parent, but it's not exclusive by any means. In some ways, though, I didn't like that because I felt like there was this really interesting, horrible dynamic where the mother was saying these terrible things to Mark, but mostly she was just like, she was so broken and couldn't be around him that put him into this utter place of complete and total blaming himself and hating himself and all this kind of stuff. And that when it crosses into her physically abusing him, I don't know, somehow for me, it kind of made it a little bit of like even more horrific and horrible, to be 100% sure, but it made it more simple. It felt like it kind of took away what had been a little more of a nuanced situation. Does that make any sense? Or am I just...
Right, going out of the way to make sure that we see the mom as the bad guy.
Right.
Yeah, like, in case you didn't know that what she's doing is horrible emotional abuse, here's some physical abuse for those of you who don't care about that sort of thing. I mean, I think it's fine, but I also think, like, not fine, like, don't do that to your kids. But, like, I mean, it's fine to portray that, but we don't often get a lot of stories of, strong emotional abuse in the absence of physical abuse. And it might be interesting to see a story where that's the focus. And it does feel to me like once she crosses into physical abuse, it seems like it would be easier for Mark to now just focus his anger on her as opposed to on himself. But I don't know. I mean, I've never been in that situation, so I certainly can't speak from experience in terms of that, how that might affect someone. Yeah.
I mean, and maybe this is just because, I mean, I have dealt with emotional abuse from parents. I've not dealt with physical abuse, not in any real way. But like, to me, of all the things that hit me, it was the idea of a mother not willing to come down and eat birthday cake with her like 9-year-old son.
Right.
That was the moment that broke me. That just like that level of, because almost it seemed like it wasn't even intentional cruelty. It was just like cruelty of neglect, and I'm like, I'm so focused on my own pain and blaming him that I'm not even thinking about how cruel this is to a kid.
Yeah, I feel like being an absent parent, emotionally absent, might have been, for lack of a better phrase, like more realistic, or like, because that happened so long ago, and then to have that the next time we see a situation with his mother is when she passes away 2 months ago. And that's when Mark breaks and loses control over being able to go back and forth between Mark and Steven. I feel like if it was strictly emotional heartbreak and there wasn't this past of also physical abuse and probably over years of physical abuse, I feel like it might have been more powerful.
Yeah, and again, I want to be very clear. I'm not for a minute trying to discount how incredibly traumatic physical abuse can be for a child or for anybody.
Right.
I haven't experienced that, so I can't speak to it. But from my understanding and working with people and reading about it, of course, I know it is devastating. That's not questioning that at all. And certainly, I think I've already read from people who say that, like, seeing that scene was both very difficult for them, but also cathartic because of their own physical abuse from parents. And I think if that's how the scene spoke to you, that's fantastic. It's just my own perspective on it. But yeah, let's get to that other part, because I think in terms of, well, even before we get to him coming back for Shiva, I was so happy with the Jewish representation, and I'll definitely talk about that in a bit. But again, you had it during Passover, and it's Egypt, and all right.
Oh,
Putting that aside. But yeah, so I'm so torn on the father, because like that scene where the father's like, please don't go, I don't want to lose another son. And he says, like, why did you let it happen? And here's also where the emotional to the physical kind of comes in. For me, again, one of the hardest parts of that scene was the father clearly trying to kind of make peace, of saying like, your mother's just not feeling well, kind of making excuses for her. When I wanted him to go be like, God damn it, get down here. It's our son's birthday. You're either going to do this or we're not going to be a family. I wanted him standing up for her, for Mark a lot more. And I think emotional abuse can be incredibly traumatic, like physical abuse. I don't want to get into which one is worse, but I feel like it is easier for someone else to ignore emotional abuse and to say, well, but I want to keep my family together. I want to keep the peace. I feel like once one parent is literally beating the child and the other is not just saying, I'm taking the child and getting away, it becomes very hard for me to like, because I agree with you, Will. The father is so loving, is so caring. And yeah, he's lost one member of his family. Of course he doesn't want to have to choose between the two others. Mm-hmm. But I kind of fault him for not. And certainly Mark faults him, and I can't blame Mark for that.
Right. No, yeah, it's a good point. There's no perfect answer here. But yeah, that's a good point.
I do think that the timeline in terms of, I thought the birthday scene was before the physical abuse scene.
It was, yeah.
Right? So I feel like at that point, it was reasonable to be like, hey, just come on, let's can we just do this? Can we just,
Yeah, it seemed like that was the next birthday after, what is his name? Rolo? Is that what they called him?
She called him Roro, I think. So I think it was like Roland.
Yeah, I think it's Roland is his actual name. Yeah, to be clear, I'm not saying the father should have like left his wife because she didn't come to the birthday party.
Right. You're saying that later, whatever. Yeah. But I mean,
it was more him kind of him making an excuse for Wendy. That she's just feeling sick instead of being like, this is not okay.
Right. Because when you see that happen with the genders reversed, it's always a big deal. When the mom is making excuses for the abusive father.
Right.
And we didn't necessarily bring that up initially, or I didn't. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I feel like at that point that was reasonable. Like I don't think like, I don't know. I think that's a point at which it's reasonable to feel like there's a way to repair the situation. Yeah. Once the physical, which isn't to say that it's fine, right? It's just that maybe there's a way to move forward and be a family again, and probably address what was going on with the emotional abuse. Once there's physical abuse, then to me that's a fairly bright line, but we don't necessarily know how much he knew about that, like and so it's possible that was like in the afternoon and he's off somewhere else, and if not, but that's also the sort of thing that I do think people make excuses about, right? And kind of like a lot of times I think people sort of like don't see what they don't want to see. Like they have suspicions, but they don't have evidence right in their face. So they kind of have this plausible deniability to themselves, which isn't good, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's without any fault in this situation, It seems like he was trying but not succeeding, and so maybe try harder. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think part of what you're saying is making me think that on some level, like I am mad at him for making the excuse to Steven of she's just not feeling well.
Right.
But I wondered also if maybe he's also making that excuse to himself, or he's sort of like, maybe Wendy isn't probably saying to the father, I hate our son, I don't want to go to his birthday.
Right.
She's probably saying, I just don't feel well. And he's kind of going along with that because he doesn't want to accept, like, no, Wendy's just not able to be in the same room as her son.
Yeah, and then also I think maybe there's an element of trying to spare Mark's feelings, of like,
Right.
be like, oh, don't, it's not really what you think it is. Like, yeah, it is, but
Right.
like,
Yeah, and that's one of those classic moments where it's like, the father is admirable for wanting to try to do that, but I think it's so clear that Mark sees right through that. Like,
for sure.
you're not sparing his feelings at all.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on so then we get to that moment where we really see Steven emerge for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, in terms of the actual details of it, I want to save most of that for when Saren is on. Though again, I've seen a number of people on like TikTok and Twitter and the like saying that this feels very real to them in terms of how their own DID manifested, or at least as they understand it. But yeah, what'd you think of getting to see that moment? Actually, I'll start with Will. Is that similar to the origin story of Steven in the comics, or is that quite different?
It's not, because it's a different traumatizing event that has to do with another character that has not been introduced. And actually, I honestly don't know anything about his mom from the comics. And I looked it up and I couldn't find anything about her. There's like no mention. It's always that Mark is the son of Elias, the rabbi in Chicago, but it doesn't say anything about the mom. Anyway, so from the comics perspective, this is arguably a more personal, internal event. The other one was a like uncle father figure that created the situation, and it was more brutal from like a bad person standpoint, and not a there was a death in our family and I'm taking it out on you standpoint. And also Stephen Grant was not a fictional character
Right.
from before. It was very much a personality grown completely naturally from compared to the comics. And then the third personality came about, I believe, around the same time, because there have been mention of third personalities and brought up in theories and stuff. So I'm not giving names or anything, but
Okay.
I don't feel like I'm breaking my promise of keeping things away from you. But yeah, I don't know. I really liked it. I think it was really well timed, as far as like she's about to break in and he's like, how do I hide? But I can't physically hide. So how do I hide away in my mind? That was, yeah, I loved that scene so much.
Yeah, I thought it was very powerful and felt convincing. And I mean, I had a friend with DID, and it feels like it matches some of what she talked about her experiences. But, it felt very well played, like it worked. It works in the story, and it feels convincing and powerful.
Yeah. And in some ways, and this isn't, I think this just happens with all stories, I'm guessing like it wouldn't make sense for it to play out exactly how it played out in the comics, if for no other reason than the comics were written when we didn't have the last 30 or 40 years of knowledge about DID, and so like just this is probably a more accurate portrayal because we understand it a lot better. I found it was just so powerful, and I loved how much it tied into so much else, like the idea that Steven is this much kind of happier-go-lucky personality who's so horrified by the things that Mark is doing. And it's funny because we always thought, or at least I certainly thought, that it was there was a lot of speculation over what's the thing that Mark did that he doesn't want Steven to know. And it was a lot of like, did he kill Layla's father? Is it something he did as Moon Knight? And so to realize like, no, the thing he's trying to protect Steven from, or try to hide from Steven, but that as we find out is trying to protect Steven from, is this knowledge of what he did when he was, a little boy. It was just...
And what he went through.
And who his mom
what he went
is,
through.
yeah.
Yeah. What he went through, but also, but also what he did. I think that's so much he doesn't want Steven to see. He doesn't want which I just thought was such. Oscar Isaac is just an amazing actor, guys. Like,
It's very good. I have to say that in this episode, I also really enjoyed Ethan Hawke being this totally different hero.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, this is multiple actors doing multiple roles, basically,
yeah,
in a lot of ways.
especially because I kept waiting for the Doctor to be a little bit evil. You know, for
Right.
the Doctor
Right.
to be more hero-like, or more like, I'm trapping you here.
Yeah.
Or even just like people's, but like, I fundamentally believe that that Doctor thinks that they are doing what is best for this person.
Right.
And like, the degree to which when Steven showed up and the Dr. Harrow was like, it's so good to see you, Steven. And just so like, let's call, oh, I'm sorry. No, your mother. Well, actually, no, then he did the phone call thing. That was pretty hard. But like,
Oh yeah, that was rough.
like I disagree with his psychiatric practices. But I just thought it was such a good detail that he just acts like a doctor who's trying to do his best.
Yeah.
I don't have
I'm saying a lot of
anything
stuff
to
that you're
add
not
to
responding to. So someone else talk about something you want to get into.
I have a bit of a question in terms of, so you mentioned Shiva, right? Like,
Yeah.
here it's very clear. It's like, oh, okay, Mark is Jewish, like officially a Jewish protagonist in the MCU, right?
Which, by the way, quick, just for those who don't know, Shiva is a practice that's associated with death in the Jewish tradition, where it's kind of like a Jewish version of a wake, but it's different, and it's that the idea is that the family spends about I think it's 8 days. I'm not exactly sure. I'm bad Jew here. Say about something a bit bitter because people are like, "Wait, you're Christian." I'll explain in a few minutes. So basically, the family just sort of opens the home. People bring food. People talk to them, and what the other people are doing is what's called sitting Shiva. You're supposed to go and sit with the family and listen to stories, and a lot of it's kind of like a wake. Like, you can laugh, you can talk about other things, you can play games, but it's supposed to be an intentional time of mourning and of remembrance, but also of the whole community coming to take care of the family of the one who's lost. And so it's a really beautiful tradition in that way. So anyway, Paul, go on.
Yeah. So Mark chooses not to partake because, obviously
Right.
his history with his mom. Just like, okay, so it's the first time you've had a Jewish protagonist in the MCU, and two of the major notes in the first, we have a scene of him like trashing his yarmulke, and then the whole episode is kind of centered around his mom guilting him, which like it did it like during as I was watching the episode, like I didn't even think about it because it doesn't feel like it's this like really bad stereotype kind of guilting. It's this very specific, concrete, something happened,
Right.
and it felt very powerful. But like, I don't know, the first time you have like a overtly Jewish mother, like her whole thing is that she's guilting her son. Like, I don't know.
That's fair, and I'll take this moment to explain myself. I've told the story. I've talked about this before, but for those who have tuned in more recently or haven't heard it, I grew up in an interfaith home. My father is Jewish. My mother is Christian. By some people's definition, therefore, I'm not Jewish. I have experienced anti-Semitism at various points in my life. Certainly, the girl when I was 8 years old, who when I was in Texas, and she found out my father was Jewish. She asked if she could feel my horns. I was certainly Jewish enough for her. I kind of hate that it's in Texas because I think anti-Semitism like that is alive and well throughout the world. So my plate, like some people would say,
And horns are like positive in Texas. The whole right?
hook 'em horns.
Only if they're long.
Only if they're
Yeah.
long, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Man.
And the thing is, Jews have. I actually have a question for you about that later. About Will, I got in a whole discussion with another friend of mine about like the term the Jew-fro or the Jewish afro, and if that's
Like the
appropriate
Hebrew or the
like that kind of stuff. But that's a whole other discussion to get to for another time. Maybe I'll cut that out because I get a whole bunch of angry emails.
angry emails are good.
Yeah, it's true.
Drive
Angry emails give us some
engagement.
talk to. But the point is, I want to think about this because I'm not sure if it is appropriate terms. But yeah, there's a whole like dialogue about Jewish hair and how that's treated and stuff like that. Getting back to your question, the point being, like, I feel like I do have some. I grew up in a Jewish home, or at least a home that was honored an awful lot of Jewish traditions. I still continue to honor a lot of those Jewish traditions, like Yom Kippur and Passover, and didn't eat bread for 8 days and all that kind of thing. And I certainly feel like anti-Semitism is something I've paid a lot of attention to in my media life and stuff. That being said, there's a lot of other characters I want to look to more. There's a person named Pop Culture Rabbi on TikTok. He's been making really great commentary on anti-Semitism and also but Jewish representation in Moon Knight. I'll post a link to his TikToks. Definitely check his stuff out. But to your question, that never occurred to me. And I tend to be somewhat sensitive to those things. I think it's because and granted, I did not have a Jewish mother. I had a Protestant mother. But I spent much time in those communities and the like. And I think, and certainly I had a Jewish grandmother, and I had my father talk about her very often. I think the stereotype often is that it's guilting you for things that are ridiculous.
Right.
Like you don't call enough. You should call your parents or visit. Well, no, if you want to have a relationship with them, calling them or visiting them from time to time is a good thing.
Right.
If you don't feel like you want to have a relationship with your parents, I'm just the king of disclaimers today. But the point being, or it's things like, in our TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend that I like, there's a wonderful song called Where's the Bathroom? And it's the Jewish mother. It's written by a Jewish woman, so it's very much like an internal commentary on this. But, it's like the Jewish mother is mad, like, how could you put the bathroom on the second floor? Weren't you thinking about me? Stuff like that. Like, I feel like the guilting Jewish mother, whereas to me, like what Wendy does, first of all, Wendy's not a very Jewish name.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it can be. But I was kind of left wondering if maybe like Wendy isn't Jewish and the father is. Right. I wasn't sure. Sorry, very long version to get to the point. The point of all this is that I didn't feel like that was Jewish mother behavior because I felt like that's not what the Jewish mother stereotype's about. But also, I think that's like what I hope most mothers won't do. But I think like if I saw a Catholic mother do that, I'd be like, oh, what a Jewish mom. I wouldn't be like, oh, what a Jewish mom she is.
Right,
I'd be like, any parent who experiences the just brain-breaking trauma of a child dying, yeah, I think it would be capable, or hopefully not, but is possible that they're going to do something horrible like what she does to Mark. But I didn't associate it with Judaism necessarily in that way.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I do want to talk about the other thing of what you said, which is him taking the kippah off, because to me that is. Well, let me actually ask you the two of you. How did you read that scene of him as part of him deciding he's not going to go into the family house, and he kind of takes the kippah off and he kind of bangs it against the ground, and then he kind of Stephen takes over?
To me, that read as I'm just hurting, I'm in pain, I want everything to break kind of a thing, and not necessarily as what could be read as like a statement of like I reject my religion, I reject what I'm supposed to do because he's supposed to go inside and do the Shiva and stuff. But because I don't have any experience with Shiva and the Jewish community other than like a friend that I grew up with in elementary school, to me that was just a lashing out. And like to the point of like tearing down. Oh wow, that was a terrible random idea. But like if you were like a pastor and you had like you were wearing like a rosary around your neck and then just like ripping it off because you're just in pain. And I kind of feel like it's not necessarily a rejection of the religion. It's more of just a rejection of, I don't want to follow the rules right now. I'm just hurting.
Yeah.
I'm
an outsider.
To me, it felt not like a rejection of like the religion or ethnicity. It felt actually like a rejection of the family, kind of like that was like a family obligation he was going to. Yeah. And that he's, obviously he's very literally rejecting it by not going in, but then this is like a sort of physical act that can kind of add to that and underscore that.
Yeah, like I think there's a lot of different ways to read it. And I'm certainly not going to say like, okay, now that you two have answered, I'm going to give the real answer. I think I'm really curious to hear all these different perspectives because it's a moment that really hit me and I've been thinking about a lot. To me, I think all what you're saying I think is probably true. I think especially because of the fact that like there's some people who keep their head covered at all times. There are also a lot of people, myself included, for whom you put a kippah on or a yarmulke or a hat, or you cover your head when you are going to be Jewish. Kind of is often the way it's described. Okay. Like when you're going into synagogue or when you're going to a Jewish function or a Jewish holiday, that's when you put it on. And so the fact that we never see Mark wearing it, he's not like wearing it when he's as a kid or anything like that, or even as a teenager. Yeah, to me, I feel like it was kind of like he puts that on because he's about to go into this place of his family's Judaism, and part of it's rejecting that. I also think there's got to be something to the fact that he is like, it isn't about. I don't think it's directly about rejecting the Jewish God, but like he is quite literally working for another god. He has experience in another god at this point. And so there is, I think, some level of like, yeah, I'm taking off this symbol for this other god because I'm now with this god.
Yeah. I'm down with Khonshu.
Yeah. And the other thing there is that for me, it's funny, even before this episode, I'd seen a post where someone was saying, how can you think that it isn't clear that Mark is Jewish? Because and they listed a couple things. One of them is that he spends every episode arguing with God, because one of the things that's it's a joke, but it's in like Abraham does it, Isaiah does it, Jacob does it, Job does it, and all the prophets do it. Is arguing with God, yelling with God, and at some points outright rejecting God. And so to me, I don't know how many Jewish theologians or Jewish thinkers were in the writing room, or if they consulted them the way they consulted DID. It's entirely possible they just threw it as a throwaway, like, this is the thing connected to his family. I think there could be a lot of, like, Jewish theological cultural significance there of him kind of, like, this is supposed to be the safe space because God is supposed to be protecting me and, like, things are supposed to be working out. And that, I mean, that's literally the Job story is, I was a good person. I did everything I could. All these terrible things happened to me, and I'm going to reject God because of it. And then all sorts of other things happen that make that story complicated. But yeah. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it feels very intentional to me, and I think it's not necessarily one thing or the other either, right? I mean, I think a lot of times we'll get visual things or story beats that play on multiple levels, and it feels like it does that here.
Mm-hmm. Especially because I think this is one part I'm not clear on. That is also the moment where Stephen really fully takes over and becomes fully actualized. I don't know if that's the right word, but like becomes sort of in control for a significant period of time. And I wondered, so if part of the idea is that Stephen is not Jewish, at least doesn't think of himself as Jewish, and that's kind of why he's taking it off. Will, in the comics, are they both Jewish?
That's a question.
Okay.
I don't think that's ever been a conversation had with. So in the comics, there's like always like a mindscape or representation of how the personalities converse with each other, whether we're talking about Bruce Banner or we're talking about Marc Spector. There's always some sort of like mindscape. And I don't believe that's ever been a conversation either as a story point or as an idle like filler space of like if the other personalities or Stephen also consider themselves Jewish.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So that's all I got. Just one or two things to say about the episode. But what else for you two was worth commenting on or talking about or asking about?
I loved when I forget the hippo's name, Temeret.
Yeah.
Talks about how there's other afterlife planes of existences. Other people are going off about how she specifically mentions the ancestral plane, and that's the Black Panther spiritual plane, but like just that she mentions that or acknowledges that there's countless other afterlives, and this is just the one that you guys fell into. Just makes me so excited because it just opens up. We can easily, quote unquote, easily do a Hercules and the Greek pantheon, and also have the underworld there, and the river Styx and all this other stuff, and it's totally fine, and it's been established that we can do that just by this one sentence. Just like, yeah, depending on your own personal beliefs, you're going to experience a different kind of afterlife. That's one of the things from the comics that I didn't know if we'd be able to accurately mix into something like the MCU that has traditionally been a little more grounded comparatively. So I'm super excited for whatever that means in the future.
Nice. Well, and that is nice too, because I don't know how you feel about Paul, but it does speak to that idea of the concern that this is the MCU kind of saying like the Egyptians are right. Or, I'm not talking about like that the ancient Egyptian pantheon's understanding, so that like, when Captain America, kills someone, or Iron Man kills someone, or when, Tony Stark dies, he's not necessarily going to the Egyptian boat on this river of sand, because I think in many ways that's my problem, is that kind of like once you start to say like this religion is real in Earth terms, that feels like you've made a truth statement that is kind of like what that's a weird thing for the MCU to declare, but also like it that's very hard to fit into everything else that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like given that, I wonder if they would have done Thor differently if they knew they were going to do this 12 years down the line.
Oh, right.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe. To me, the whole idea of afterlives, it's always hard talking about religion and like thoroughly not believing in it, because like I always want to be clear that like I never want to disparage anyone for whatever they believe, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like I also on a personal level find most of those beliefs like utterly fantastical and like okay. And the idea, like the fact that so many different people have believed so many completely different things that just happen to line up with wherever they were born most of the time, like to me is a little bit of a sort of like, really? Yeah, that's a huge coincidence. And I understand that all of these things could theoretically be different understandings of one sort of central principle, right? And so I think whenever you take a story like a sci-fi story, basically, right, where you do have fantasy, you have things that like that don't exist in our world, then when you go into these things, I think that's always like a very, like you always, it's a gamble, right? Because it's like, are you going to say like all these things are true, but they're all kind of true from a certain point of view? And like I think that's an interesting way. Like I think all the different pantheons are super fun, but it's like, how do they work with like where are Tony and Natasha? Like, are they somewhere, or like, I don't know. I know like DC has like the Greek gods at least, right? And there's like a Hades, but then there's also just like ghosts, right? There's like Boston, what's his name? Boston something. And Deadman. And like it's tricky. And I guess for me, like the easiest way to deal with it is just be like, all right, you do you, I'll take it as it comes in the story, and the whole, there is some point where all the things are interconnecting so many things. It's like, I'm like, I don't know how all these things really fit together, but like somehow comics always seem to pull it off just by like, you don't need, like the idea of canon is that there's like this is all the stories that are real and this is all one reality. But like in comics, I feel like a lot of the time it's like, yeah, so Batman's story was this. Now it's this. Don't worry about it, you know? And then sometimes there's a big thing like Flashpoint or in you know, the MCU, the whole multiverse thing. And like, then you do a big story about it. But at the same time, it's also like, don't worry about it. Like, you know, it's like, just enjoy the ride. And that's kind of where I end up kind of stuck being, where it's like, you know, I'm like, as long as we get off this boat, I guess I'm okay. Like, and like, honestly, like killing the god to keep yourself from ending up in, you know, wherever you're going to end up. Okay, I'm cool with that. Like, it's probably going to be really hard, I would think. And she seems like a sweetheart. Like, you know, I'd rather maybe let's go with incapacitate instead and turn the boat around, right? If you can pull that off. But like, you know, self-preservation.
Yeah, and it's funny too because, like, I definitely hear what you're saying. I think it's worth pointing out that I think for an awful lot of religious people, myself included, worrying about like having a fixed idea of what the afterlife is. Certainly, there's almost nothing of that in Judaism, and I think a lot more Christians are coming back to an understanding of like that's not the point. The point is what happens here in this life and what you do in this life, and everything else is a mystery. We don't know. But there are some people who have very specific ideas about angels and devils and all this kind of stuff. I think it's ridiculous. Like, I have just as much the ridiculousness of that being fantastical, but fair enough. But yeah, I think for me, this feels very much like when, you know, T'Challa or Killmonger, you know, eats the purple flower, or no, I think it's like they ground it up and like he breathes the dust of it, to take him to the Vision Quest kind of thing in the ancestral lands. Which, and if I'm getting the terminology wrong, please correct me.
Ancestral plane, right?
Ancestral plane, thank you. I think it is possible to see that as there is literally a different plane of existence on which his father still exists, as do all these other former Black Panthers and Kings of Wakanda, and he is literally talking to them. I think it's also possible he's basically on an LSD trip. You know, encountering the version of his father that he thinks he does. And especially given how different the ancestral plane looks to T'Challa versus how it looks to Killmonger, to me it's very much a like, yeah, you go where your own mind takes you kind of a thing. You know,
as
and
you
it's
understand it.
Yeah, and I mean the same way that like I think like, you know, the peyote rituals that I don't want to say Native American because of one very specific tribe of Native Americans. I don't know which one it was. I think this. I don't even want to try to get, but you know, that idea is like, you know, it can be seen as like the peyote is opening you up to the spirits talking to you. It can be seen as it's opening your mind to think of things in new ways. You know, whatever it can be. And yeah, I think I like that idea a lot more than like this is the literal thing that happens. And what I keep coming back to is we have like if it would be funny, like so far we've only seen 2 Jewish rituals in this show, both of which were Shiva for the son and then Shiva for the mother. I think if we actually saw Mark die and then we saw like Mark's father holding Shiva for Mark, and that's when this all happened, I think I'd really not like it, because then I would kind of feel like, yeah, this is saying like he's actually dead and this is actually what happens when you die. I think there's enough room to think that like this is all what's going through his head in the 0.5 seconds as he's, you know, about to die from the gunshots, and maybe the divinity is going to step in and heal him. That's what allows me to kind of feel about it much more in this metaphorical kind of a sense. Because yeah, I agree with you, Paul. If we had 2 or 3 episodes in this world and treated this world like kind of the way like with Loki and treating the whole like I don't even remember where it go, but the whole like the realm at the end of time that they all go to in Last. I just hated that. I hated that so much, and that's not even a divinity thing. That's just a nonsense time travel wibbly wobbly
timey wimey.
Anyway, no more about Loki, but yeah. Rant over. I'm ranting a lot. I apologize today.
That's okay.
I'm just here to set the volleyball up so you can spike it.
There you go.
Although spiking is quick. Anyway. So.
Yeah.
I'm criticizing my metaphor, not your, spike. You know, ranting.
Yeah. There you go.
Spiking an episode of anime, it takes a little bit longer.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm on Team Spike, not Team Angel, but that's a whole other story.
Oh,
With the exception of a certain episode in season 6 that I think was terribly written and terrible with the character, but anyway. Now that we're off on 8 million different tangents. Any other last things? Paul, do you have any bullet points we haven't covered yet?
I'm good.
Will, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I am equally excited. I'm excited for this last episode. One, because I want to know where they're going, and two, there are a couple of things from the comics I want to see if they're going to work in, and three, I'm still just excited to do like a season recap and just explode about comic stuff.
Oh, at this point, we're doing like 5 season recaps.
That's fine.
Right.
Somebody come on. We're going to talk about the Jewishness of it. We're going to talk about the D&D-ness of it. We're going to talk about like all this different but so Will, you're good. Paul, you're good.
Yeah.
I'm good because I'm wearing the most comfortable pair of boxer shorts I have ever owned in my life.
Wow,
I got
segue.
them from Manscaped. I'm becoming pretty darn good at these. Listen to my episode on
solid.
mythology and how I challenge the myth that male people shouldn't groom themselves in good ways. But today, that's the transition. I'm feeling good because I'm wearing boxer shorts by Manscaped. Manscaped is a sponsor of this episode. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped. They're the best in below-the-waist grooming. They offer precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. I hate that line, but I'm going to say it every time because I want their money. More importantly, I want to give you the chance to get their product for less money. They recently launched the Ultimate Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package.
4.0.
4.0. 4 million people worldwide have used Manscaped, and they've trusted that Manscaped with, putting a blade against a pretty particular part of their body. I think, Paul, you said you have made use of the trimmer.
Yeah, I wasn't super specific about how, but yeah, it feels safe and
Yeah, the boxer shorts are fantastic. The the deodorant and toning. It was a lot warmer day.
It's pronounced ball toner.
That's also true. Crop duster, I think, is another term that's used for it.
Crop duster.
I did some exercising today. I haven't really been exercising a bit. There was some chafing, that happens. You're sweating a lot, and the toner kind of gel stuff was actually pretty damn good. So, if you're interested in the Manscaped lifestyle, for whatever gender, if you have balls and that kind of requirements, go to manscaped.com, and if you use the promo code HEROETHICS, HEROETHICS. I'm amazed that I've spelled that correctly every time I've done this, but HEROETHICS at Manscaped, you get 20% off. You get the full performance package. You can get the just a pair of boxers. You can get the I have had a couple of guests now say that they want the weed whacker, which is the one for your nose and ear hair, which Riki said that he used, and then all of a sudden he could like hear things. He said he used it on the ears and he could hear things a lot better. So yeah, it's great stuff. Will, have you tried out your Manscaped package yet? I think you said you got boxer shorts.
I got boxers, I got the straight razor, and I got the body wash.
Nice.
I just got the boxers out of the laundry last night, so they will be first on the next time I have to wear boxers thing. Today was not a boxer day, but by next episode I will have a review for most of it. I do kind of need a shave, so
awesome.
Did you say the straight razor?
Yeah, it's like it's a manual razor for your face.
Okay. It's not an actual,
because the thing.
I used to actually
it's not
shave
a literal,
with a straight razor, with a literal straight razor.
Sorry. Yeah. Manual razor, not straight razor, as in like a giant
And
machete.
they suggest that we tell shaving injury stories, which this was my head, but I used to shave the sides of my head in that style before everybody was rocking the undercut. And I dropped the straight razor, and my instinct when I drop things is to catch them, which I did. And I think the scar finally went away 25 years later. But so, these are safer tools.
Yeah,
for,
these are precision.
jewels.
It is a ceramic blade in the Manscaped trimmers, which is meant to be even safer, but still sharp enough to do your hair stuff, but not to cut you in other ways. it's just great. It's just great stuff. They've put so much time and effort into this. I'm not going to insult the product more about their name, but it doesn't have to be Manscaped. Lots of people scape.
It does have cape in it, though.
Yeah,
it does
that's
have
true.
a
Manscaped.
we are
Cape.
superhero ethics.
Capescaped. I like that. So yeah, check it out. It's definitely worthwhile. There's some great products there, and also it's a way to support this podcast. So please check that out. And if you really, really don't want to hear ads about that, email me with the subject line, "I would like to be a patron." We can talk about other ways of raising money for this podcast. That being said, I am happy to be sponsored by them. It's a great product. Will, I'm looking into your window and I'm seeing Legos, and I'm thinking, it's fun to see the Lego as a completed project, but what if I wanted to watch you build Legos?
That's a great question. Thank you, Matthew. So I have a Twitch. Is twitch.tv/silverdreamer, silver with a Y. And during the week, I build sets. Sometimes it's Lego kits. Sometimes it's model kits like Gunpla and such like that. I do that on Wednesdays and Friday evenings at 6:30 Pacific on Twitch. Come and find me. Saturdays, I have a workout stream. You can use channel points to dictate what workout I do. And then Sundays, I have a comic-themed stream where I am going through my comic book collection and organizing it all to see exactly how many comics I own.
Nice.
I will say I really enjoy watching Will's stream, and I have a lot of channel points. So one of these Saturdays, I'm going to roll in, and you are going to be very sore on Sunday. And I see the mystery box up there that I remember you building kind of early on in the stream.
Yeah,
that's
some
like really cool Lego
question block.
I would love to watch on Twitch as you just teach him like one or two basic like Taekwondo things he should be doing every day to do like 100 reps of something or whatever.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, we could do that. I have a Twitch as
Paul.
well. I'm Zen Madman. I don't really do it. I know you're setting me up and I'm cutting you off. Sorry, but
that's fine.
I figured I'd just expedite the process.
There you go.
Yeah.
You do make videos somewhere though. Where do you make videos?
I do. I make videos currently on YouTube as Zen Madman Poker is my poker videos. I have an old channel, just Zen Madman, not just Zen Madman. Zen Madman. There's no just. And it's got a bunch of videos from a while ago, some of which are probably hilarious, not necessarily intentionally, but yeah. So there's that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely check out both of those folks. And of course, if you want to check out the other podcasts I'm doing, you should go to theethicalpanda.com. There you'll find my episodes of Superhero Ethics. This podcast, you'll also find episodes of Star Wars Universe podcast. I recently did an episode of the album concept hour, which I had to yell at the host because it was almost 2.5 hours. They edited it down significantly. But it was really great because we discussed an album that was a very big part of my childhood, Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses.
Oh, you did.
And I got
Appetite.
to talk about how I both love the music so much and that re-listening to the lyrics 30 years later has they hit a little differently. I have maybe a little different understanding of the gender politics and sexual mores as displayed in those records. But yeah, we don't just bash on it. We get into really good discussions about like what was happening with all those songs, what was the meaning behind them, how Slash doesn't like Sweet Child of Mine, which baffles me, but I guess I can also understand.
But it's the greatest guitar solo ever. I could understand why you wouldn't like One in a Million, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch there. Anyway, but check all that out. And there, of course, also you can find all the ways to contact me. There, of course, you can find all the ways to give us feedback. We love feedback. Tell us what you think. What do you think of the what's happening in this show? Do you have experience with dissociative identity disorder? Are you Jewish or have experience with Judaism and have thoughts on the representation there? Do you just want to talk about how Oscar Isaac is just a phenomenal actor and all the acting was great? Like, honestly, I am often very critical of child actors. The two kids who played like little kid Mark and like teenage Mark were both, I mean, they're small parts, but very emotionally harrowing parts, and they both did them so well. So yeah, tell us what you think. Facebook, Twitter, email, all the places, carrier pigeon, all that's on theethicalpanda.com. So actually, carrier pigeon is not, because carrier pigeons are not an ethical way to treat animals. So I do have the ethical way to contact me by carrier pigeon on the website, which is not to do it. So on behalf of myself, everybody else, Will, Paul, all the pigeons, thank you and have a great day.
Take care.
Later.
Bye.
Sooner.